Chapter 1. A Call to the Unknown. The silence of space, so vast and indifferent, was often punctuated by the hum of ship engines or the routine crackling of comms systems between distant civilizations. Yet, on one unremarkable morning in the far reaches of the galaxy, the silence shattered. The transmission came through without warning, its suddenness cutting through the static like a blade. At first, it seemed like just another routine message, a request for supplies, a beacon of distress from an uncharted station. But there was something about the urgency in the voice, the tremor of panic in the words, that caught the attention of Dr. Elias Grange. He had spent a decade navigating the intricate and often bizarre world of intergalactic veterinary medicine, dealing with creatures ranging from the common to the alien, the mundane to the extraordinary. But nothing had prepared him for this. The signal was broadcast from a vessel known as the Syndrix Pride, a massive warship adorned with intricate alien designs that spoke of its alien origins. Its crew, an eclectic mixture of various species, was known far and wide, but it was its captain, the ruler of the Tharkar Dominion, Queen Zorith, that made the ship famous. The Tharkar were a brutal, proud, and ancient species, whose empire spanned multiple star systems. They were feared and revered across the galaxy, their reach stretching into every corner of space. The mere mention of their name sent shivers down the spines of many, and the Queen, with her towering form and sharp, calculating mind, was the heart of their power. Few dared to oppose her. Few even dared to question her orders. But now, for the first time in Elias's career, he had received a request from her ship, a request that was not only unprecedented but potentially dangerous. It was a call for help, but not the kind of help one might expect. It wasn't a request for medical supplies, nor a plea for aid in the traditional sense. No, this was far more personal. The message that crackled through his comm system made that clear from the start. A voice, distorted by the distortion of the galaxy itself, echoed through the static. Dr. Elias Grange, Earthling Veterinary Specialist. I am Queen Zorith of the Tharkar Dominion. You are hereby requested to board the Syndrix Pride immediately. Our beast is in critical condition. It requires your expertise. Failure to comply will result in severe consequences. You have 12 hours. The message ended with an ominous silence that seemed to stretch for eternity. Elias sat there, staring at the glowing display in front of him. His mind raced, trying to process the gravity of the situation. The Tharkar Queen's beast? What kind of creature would require the attention of a human veterinarian? The Tharkar were known for their fearsome, nearly mythical war beast giant, alien creatures bred for battle and terror. They were as much a part of the Queen's court as her own soldiers, and they had earned their place in history as some of the most terrifying creatures in the galaxy. But a veterinarian? He couldn't help but laugh nervously, shaking his head. He had dealt with beasts of all kinds, creatures that made his blood run cold, beings from distant planets with anatomy so alien it was almost impossible to understand. But this was different. This was more than just a job. It was a challenge that could cost him his life. He had heard rumors of the Queen's legendary beast, a creature that had been the subject of many whispered conversations in the far corners of the galaxy. Stories spoke of it in hushed tones, as though its very existence was something to be feared. The beast was said to be a hybrid, a terrifying fusion of organic and mechanical elements, crafted from the deepest depths of the Tharkar Empire's genetic engineering programs. It was said to be so large it could crush entire cities with a single step. It was a creature born of war, bred for destruction. And now it was dying. Or so the Queen's message claimed. Elias had seen a great deal in his time as a veterinarian. He had treated everything from the simplest terrestrial animals to the most complex extraterrestrial species. But the Tharkar Queen's war beast was something far beyond his experience. He knew, deep down, that he had no business getting involved. This was a beast that should have remained untouched, an enigma wrapped in an aura of terror. It was not his place to intervene, but curiosity gnawed at him. He couldn't ignore the call. And then, there was the other part, the part of him that thrived on challenges, that relished in the complexity of the unknown. It was a professional instinct, one that had gotten him into trouble more than once. But this was different. It was more than just a medical dilemma. This was an opportunity, a chance to prove himself in a way he never had before. Elias took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the console. His mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts, but one truth stood clear in his mind. This was a call he couldn't ignore. The Tharkar Queen had requested his expertise. And if there was one thing Elias knew for certain, it was that refusing her request would be tantamount to signing his own death sentence. So, he did the only thing he could do. He clicked the confirmation button. "I'll be there," he muttered to himself. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Elias leaned back in his seat, feeling the familiar hum of his vessel as it activated the warp drives. The journey to the Syndrix Pride would take several hours, but that was time enough for him to prepare himself for what lay ahead. He had no illusions about what this task entailed. He was being summoned to the heart of the Tharkar Empire, to an alien ship brimming with danger and intrigue. He didn't know what he would face upon arrival. He didn't know what kind of creature he would find. But one thing was certain. This would be the most difficult, and possibly the most dangerous, job of his life. As his ship hurtled toward the coordinates of the Syndrix Pride, Elias tried to gather his thoughts. He wasn't sure what he had gotten himself into, but he had always prided himself on being able to adapt to any situation. His work with animals, alien or otherwise, had taught him that the key to survival was understanding and patience. If he could gain the creature's trust, perhaps he could find a way to save it. And perhaps, just perhaps, in the process, he could gain the respect of the Tharkar. If the Queen's beast could be healed, if he could truly pull off the impossible, he would secure a place in galactic history. His name would be spoken in every corner of the universe, and every species, human and alien alike, would know that Dr. Elias Grange had once saved the Tharkar Queen's legendary beast. But he had no illusions about the stakes. He knew the risks. The Tharkar were not a species to be trifled with. They respected strength and power, not weakness. And if Elias failed, if he couldn't save the creature, he knew the consequences would be severe. The Queen didn't simply demand a healer's help, she commanded obedience. Disobeying her could lead to an agonizing death. Still, as his ship sliced through the void, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that something much greater was at stake here. Something far beyond just saving a single creature. This was a test of survival, of intelligence, of willpower. The Syndrix Pride loomed ahead, its massive form filling the viewfinder. The ship's dark, metallic surface gleamed with an almost ominous sheen, and Elias could see faint flashes of activity on the bridge as the ship's crew prepared for his arrival. His vessel docked smoothly with the enormous warship, and as the airlock engaged, Elias could feel the weight of the task ahead pressing down on him. A Tharkar officer, tall and imposing with the usual ornate armor, greeted him at the airlock. There was no warmth in the officer's eyes, only the cold, calculating gaze of someone who had seen too many deaths to care about another. "You are the human vet." The officer's voice was rough, a deep growl that resonated in the air. "Follow me." Without a word, Elias followed the officer through the darkened corridors of the Syndrix Pride, his footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The walls were adorned with alien symbols and intricate carvings, evidence of a culture older and far more complex than anything he had ever encountered. His senses were overwhelmed by the strange mixture of foreign scents and the occasional thrum of energy surging through the ship's massive systems. They stopped in front of a large, reinforced door. The officer gave a curt nod, stepping aside to allow Elias to enter. Inside, Elias found himself face to face with the legendary beast. It was enormous, a creature that towered over him, its massive form lying motionless on a padded platform. Its body was covered in dark, scaly armor-like skin, while strange bioluminescent patterns pulsed faintly beneath the surface, giving it an ethereal, almost mystical appearance. The beast's head was a mix of reptilian and avian features, with sharp, jagged teeth that seemed capable of tearing through metal. Its eyes were closed, but Elias could feel the weight of its presence, the power and ferocity that emanated from it even in its weakened state. For a moment, he simply stood there, taking in the sight of the creature. He had read about it, heard the rumors, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. The Tharkar's beast was a legend, an ancient symbol of the Queen's power. And now, it was in his hands. A sense of dread settled in Elias's chest, but he forced himself to step forward. The beast was alive, barely, but alive, and it was his responsibility to save it. As Elias entered the massive chamber where the Tharker Queen's beast lay, he couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. The atmosphere in the room was thick with an oppressive weight. He knew the gravity of the task at hand. His life was no longer his own. It was now a part of the Tharker Empire's calculations, for better or worse. Yet, despite the stakes, something in the pit of his stomach twisted with curiosity, excitement even. The creature before him was the stuff of legends. Tales of its ferocity, its destructive power, and its unrelenting loyalty to the Queen were whispered in every corner of the galaxy. And now, here he was, the foolish human who had dared to step into the lion's den. The beast lay still, its colossal frame dwarfed by the high-tech medical chamber around it. Thick, reptilian skin, mixed with metallic plating, covered its body like a living armor. The creature's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, the faint pulse of its bioluminescent markings barely visible in the dim light. Despite the injuries it bore, the creature was nothing short of majestic. The scales on its hide gleamed darkly, and the sharp talons that adorned its legs and paws would tear through anything in its path if given the chance. Elias stood frozen, absorbing the sheer power and mystery of the creature. Its head was adorned with an array of sharp, jagged ridges that seemed to follow the natural curve of its skull, and its eyes when open were said to gleam with an intelligence that rivaled the most advanced alien races. But now, the beast's eyes were shut. It was not dead, but it was barely hanging on. The officer who had escorted Elias into the room moved to the side without a word, standing stiffly against the wall as if awaiting orders. The door slid shut behind Elias with a soft hiss, and the chamber's artificial lights flickered briefly before stabilizing. His heart pounded in his chest, and he finally stepped forward, cautiously approaching the creature's massive form. A low rumble resonated from the depths of the creature's throat, a growl so deep that it seemed to vibrate in Elias's bones. He froze, watching as the beast's eyes cracked open slowly, the eerie, glowing amber gaze fixing on him. Elias swallowed hard. There was a sense of recognition in those eyes, but also a palpable sense of danger. Easy, Elias muttered to himself, more to calm his own nerves than anything else. The words fell out of place in the face of such an intimidating creature. He had dealt with dangerous alien life forms before, but never something like this. The sheer size and power of the Tharker beast were overwhelming. Still, he had a job to do, and he couldn't let fear take over. He moved slowly, carefully, not wanting to startle the creature further. His heart raced as he inspected the beast's injuries. The scales along its side were cracked, exposing a network of biotechnical wiring that Elias knew was part of the creature's internal systems that were now malfunctioning, causing its body to deteriorate. It wasn't just the physical injuries that needed attention, but the neural interface that connected the creature's mind to the mechanical enhancements embedded within its flesh. The sound of Elias's steps was the only noise in the room as he assessed the damage. The beast's breathing was steady but faint, each breath bringing with it a sound like wind through a cave. He approached its injured side, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the creature's flank. The beast let out another low growl, this time more of a warning. Elias paused, his heart racing, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he placed his hand gently on its side, feeling the warmth of its skin beneath the metallic plating. The glow of the bioluminescent markings pulsed slightly under his fingers, almost as if it recognized his touch. For a brief moment, there was an understanding between them, a silent communication that passed through the air. "All right, big guy," Elias whispered softly, adjusting his stance and preparing his tools. "Let's see if we can fix you up." As he began working, the task became more complicated with every passing minute. The beast's injuries were not just physical, they were biological, mechanical, and perhaps something more. The neural interface embedded in its brain was malfunctioning, a part of the creature's body that was intricately tied to its cybernetic enhancements. Without the correct knowledge or equipment, Elias knew he was venturing into dangerous territory. But he had no choice. The Queen had ordered this. Failure wasn't an option. For what felt like hours, Elias worked tirelessly, adjusting, realigning the neural interfaces, and carefully administering the treatments he had learned in his long years of dealing with alien physiology. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he carefully calibrated the machinery, his hands moving with practiced precision. The beast remained still, but its eyes never left him. Elias felt that gaze burning into him, almost as if the creature was assessing his every move. It was unnerving, but Elias couldn't afford to show fear. Not now. Finally, with one last careful adjustment, Elias stepped back, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. He stared at the beast, his heart pounding. It was far from healed, but the vital signs were improving. The neural interface was responding, and the beast's breathing had steadied. But there was still no movement. The creature hadn't gotten up, hadn't reacted to the treatment. It was still waiting. Elias let out a slow breath. "You're not out of the woods yet," he muttered. He had done what he could, but whether it would be enough, he wasn't sure. The beast still needed more rest, time to heal, perhaps even more treatments from someone far more skilled than he was. But for now, he had bought it time. And that, in itself, was something. The door slid open behind him, and the officer from before re-entered, his cold gaze scanning the room. "Report," the officer said gruffly. Elias wiped his brow, trying to steady himself. "It's stable for now. The neural system is responding to the treatment. I've stabilized the immediate injuries, but it needs time. The mechanical enhancements are still weak. If they fail again, it could be catastrophic." The officer didn't respond immediately, but Elias could feel the weight of the situation in the air. The officer was there for a reason. He was here to ensure Elias had succeeded, not just for the Queen's beast, but for the Tharker's larger plans. "You'll be staying here until the Queen's orders are clear," the officer said, his tone cold. "The beast may be stable for now, but the real test is yet to come." Elias nodded slowly. He had no choice but to follow the orders. The Queen's beast had been saved for the moment, but the real question remained. Would he survive the next phase? Chapter 2. The Queen's Command. The hours that followed were filled with the hum of alien machinery and the distant murmur of the Tharker crew members as they went about their duties. Elias, though exhausted, had no time for rest. Queen Zoratha's orders were clear. He would remain aboard the Syndrix Pride until the creature was fully healed, or until further instructions were given. And despite his initial trepidation, Elias found himself oddly at ease, having succeeded in the most challenging task of his career. At least, that was what he thought at first. It wasn't long before he was summoned to the Queen's private chambers, a grand, imposing room at the heart of the ship, where the very walls seemed to vibrate with the power of the Tharker. As he walked down the darkened corridors, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. The Queen's throne room loomed ahead, and Elias knew that this would be the moment that determined his fate. He entered the chamber with a deep breath, finding himself face to face with Queen Zorath. The Queen, towering and regal in her full armor, regarded him with an expression that was both intense and unreadable. Her presence filled the room, her every movement calculated, precise. She was no mere ruler, she was a force of nature, a being who commanded reverence. "You have done as I asked, human," she said, her voice low and commanding. "The beast lives, thanks to your skills. But this is only the beginning." Elias stood straighter, his mind racing. "I've stabilized the creature, Queen Zorath, but its neural systems are still delicate. I can't guarantee full recovery without further treatment." Queen Zoratha's gaze never wavered. "I did not ask for your guarantees, Dr. Grange. I asked for your service. And now you will see the true test of your worth." Her lips curled into something resembling a smile, but it was far from comforting. "The beast's recovery is crucial to our empire's future. Your role is far from over. You will accompany the beast on its journey to the heart of our dominion. If it fails, so will you." Elias's heart skipped a beat. He had been expecting something more, but this was far beyond anything he could have anticipated. "You will be the beast's caretaker, human. Do not fail us again." Her words were a decree, a sentence of unspoken consequence. The Queen's command was clear. Elias had entered a game he could not refuse, a game where failure meant death, and success meant survival in the most dangerous empire the galaxy had ever known. Elias stood before Queen Zorath, feeling the weight of her gaze like a physical force pressing against his chest. The room was cold, its vastness adding to the tension in the air. Queen Zorath was a creature of unmatched power. Her presence alone was enough to command the attention of the universe's most fearsome warriors. And now, standing in her shadow, Elias understood just how small he was in the grand scheme of the galaxy. "I will do as you ask," Elias said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "But the beast will need more time. Its neural systems are delicate, as I mentioned. It's not fully recovered. You're asking a lot." Zoratha's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was not one of warmth, but of something darker, something that spoke of centuries of power and control. "Time is something I do not have," she replied coldly. "The beast must be restored fully before we move to the next stage. You will take it with you to the heart of our empire, and you will ensure it is ready for what comes next." The Tharkar have been waiting for this moment for centuries. Elias blinked, caught off guard by her words. The heart of the Tharkar Empire? He had assumed he was merely a temporary solution, a brief fix to the beast's failing systems. But now it seemed he was entangled in something much larger than he had ever imagined. The beast wasn't just a war machine, it was a symbol, a pivotal part of a plan far beyond his understanding. "You are now part of something much greater than yourself, Dr. Grange," Zorath continued, her voice like a whisper through steel. "Fail, and the consequences will extend far beyond your life." "I understand," Elias said, swallowing hard. His mind raced. What had he gotten himself into? This was no ordinary medical case. This was a political game, one where failure wasn't just a matter of life or death, it was a matter of empire-shattering consequence. The Tharkar Empire was ancient, powerful, and ruthless. To be caught in the middle of their schemes was not a position one found themselves in lightly. "I will need to prepare the beast for this journey," Elias said, taking a deep breath. "It's in no condition to travel, let alone embark on some grand mission." "You will make it ready," Queen Zorath said, her words absolute. "There is no alternative." The command left no room for negotiation. Zorath turned her attention to a nearby officer, who immediately stepped forward with a data pad in hand. "The coordinates have been set," the officer said, presenting the pad to Elias. "The beast will be transferred to the transport vessel for the journey. You will accompany it, as per the Queen's orders." The officer's words were clipped, his tone all business. Elias could feel the oppressive weight of the Tharkar's expectations bearing down on him. He had no choice. This was no longer a job he could walk away from. The beast had become part of something far larger than himself, and Elias had to make sure it survived, no matter the cost. With a sharp nod, Elias took the data pad, his hands slightly trembling as he looked over the details. He was about to embark on a journey that would take him deep into the heart of the Tharkar Empire, far from everything he knew. The next few days would be a test of everything he had learned, everything he had become. But he wasn't just a vet anymore. He was the only one who could save the beast, and he knew that his success or failure would determine the fate of not just the creature, but possibly the entire galaxy. With the beast's life in his hands, Elias turned and walked toward the transport vessel that would take him to the heart of the Tharkar Empire. Chapter 3: Into the Heart of the Empire. The journey to the Tharkar capital was nothing short of intense. Elias sat in the small, dimly lit compartment of the transport vessel, his mind racing as the ship rocketed through the vast emptiness of space. The hum of the engines was the only sound, a constant reminder of the isolation he now felt. He had never been this far into Tharkar territory, and as the ship flew deeper into the heart of the Empire, he couldn't help but feel like an intruder in a land ruled by gods. The beast was secured in the cargo hold beneath him, still unconscious, its breathing shallow but steady. The neural interface had stabilized somewhat, but Elias knew it was only a temporary fix. The beast wasn't out of danger yet. The journey ahead would test its strength and his own. The planet below, the Tharkar capital, was a world of impossible grandeur. Its surface was covered with massive cities, towering spires of stone and metal that seemed to pierce the sky itself. The capital city, Tharkar Prime, was a place of absolute power, the beating heart of the Tharkar dominion. It was a city built for war, a city where the most powerful of the Tharkar rulers resided, and where they ruled over all who lived in the galaxy. As the transport vessel descended into the atmosphere, Elias looked out of the viewport, taking in the sheer scale of the place. He had seen some of the most breathtaking landscapes in his career, but nothing compared to this. Tharkar Prime was a vision of ancient majesty, a blend of technology and natural beauty that seemed almost impossible to comprehend. The ship touched down on a massive landing platform at the heart of the city. Elias's eyes widened as the ship's docking bay doors opened, revealing the sprawling metropolis below. The city stretched out before him, its sleek, black buildings soaring into the sky, connected by a web of intricate roads and transport lines. The transport was met by an entourage of armed Tharkar soldiers, their towering figures casting long shadows across the platform as they waited. They were clad in black armor that gleamed with a metallic sheen, their eyes cold and unwavering. They had no interest in Elias as an individual. He was a tool, a necessary part of the mission, and that was all. He was escorted from the ship by the soldiers, his every step under the watchful gaze of the Tharkar. He could feel the intensity of their stares, the pressure of being in enemy territory. The weight of the mission pressed heavily on his shoulders, and every time he glanced at the soldiers or the towering statues of Tharkar leaders that dotted the city, his anxiety grew. He had no allies here. He had no friends. He was a human, in a world that valued strength above all else. His only purpose was to heal the beast, to make sure it was ready for whatever the Tharkar had planned for it. The Tharkar led him through the sprawling city, and Elias couldn't help but be awestruck by the sights around him. The city was a marvel of technology and architecture, but it was also a place of cold, mechanical precision. There was no warmth in the air, no human touch. The streets were lined with alien species that were unfamiliar to Elias, creatures from every corner of the galaxy, their faces twisted in fear or reverence as they passed by. The Tharkar ruled here, and their presence was undeniable, suffocating. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the massive palace at the center of Thurka Prime. It was a towering fortress, a symbol of the Tharkar's might and dominance. The gates were adorned with ancient symbols of the Tharkar Empire, etched into the stone like the markings of an old and powerful civilization. The moment Elias stepped inside, he felt the air grow thick with the weight of history. The palace was a place of power, of ancient rituals, and now, he was a part of it. The beast was brought into the palace's medical wing, a massive chamber filled with advanced technology. Elias stood at the entrance, his mind swirling with thoughts of what was to come. He had no idea what the queen had in store for him. All he knew was that the creature was the key to something much greater than itself. Whether Elias could heal it in time was a question he had no answer for. But one thing was clear: the Tharkar had no room for failure. As the medical team prepared the beast for its next phase, Elias felt the pressure of the entire galaxy on his shoulders. He wasn't just treating an animal. He was treating a symbol, a weapon, a living piece of Tharkar power. And if he failed, Elias didn't want to think about what would happen if he failed. The deeper Elias moved into the palace, the more suffocating the atmosphere became. The halls were lined with dark marble, etched with ancient runes that pulsed faintly in the dim light. It felt as if the very walls of the palace were alive, bearing witness to the weight of history, of centuries of dominance and power. The Tharkar were a race that understood control over the galaxy, over their enemies, and even over the very forces of nature that shaped their world. Elias felt it in the air, a palpable tension that threatened to swallow him whole. It was in every step, every sound, every glance from the soldiers that lined the walls. The Tharkar were watching him. He was no longer just a veterinarian. He was a prisoner of circumstance, a man caught between the colossal machinery of empire and the fragile life of a creature he barely understood. As he followed the silent Tharkar officers through the labyrinth of the palace, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he was being led to his fate. The medical wing was located at the heart of the palace, a place reserved for the most sacred and important of the Tharkar's war machines, their most revered creatures. Elias had read about the war beasts of the Tharkar Dominion, but nothing in the galaxy's lore could have prepared him for the sheer scale and power of what lay ahead. The room where they took him was massive, far larger than anything Elias had ever seen. It was filled with the soft hum of alien technology, large, intricate machines that Elias couldn't begin to comprehend, their glowing screens and whirring gears a testament to the advanced nature of Tharkar science. But what caught his eye wasn't the machinery. It was the beast. The massive creature, still unconscious and sedated, was strapped to an enormous table in the center of the room. Its enormous, scaled body sprawled out across the surface, its head hanging slightly to one side. Its limbs, long and muscular, were covered in the same dark, scaly plating Elias had seen before, but now the damage was more apparent. The beast had sustained severe, trauma-crushing wounds to its side, deep cuts along its armored hide, and damage to the neural systems that connected its organic and mechanical parts. But Elias could also see something else, something that disturbed him more than the visible injuries. The creature was in pain. It wasn't just physical, it was psychological, emotional. He could feel it in the air, a deep, reverberating anguish emanating from the beast. Elias swallowed hard, stepping closer to the creature. "It's worse than I thought," he muttered to himself, more out of frustration than anything else. The neural systems were malfunctioning at a deeper level than he had anticipated. The beast wasn't just injured, it was broken, in ways that went far beyond the realm of medicine. "You will fix it, human," a voice rumbled behind him. Elias turned to see the Tharker officer standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I will do my best," Elias replied, his voice steady but his mind racing. "But I need the proper tools. I need more time. The neural systems are deeply integrated into the beast's psyche. I can't guarantee it will be fully functional again without extensive repairs." The officer stepped forward, his armored boots clicking against the floor. "You have no time," he said coldly. "The Queen's command is clear. The beast must be restored. Failure is not an option." Elias felt the weight of the officer's words sink in. The stakes had been raised higher than he could have imagined. This wasn't just about saving a creature, it was about fulfilling a mission that could change the course of the Tharker Empire itself. He could feel the eyes of the entire palace on him, watching his every move. Without another word, Elias approached the beast once more, his mind spinning as he worked. He activated his diagnostic tools, attempting to re-establish a connection with the neural systems that controlled the beast's cybernetic enhancements. The creature's body twitched involuntarily as Elias connected his equipment to its neural interface. He winced at the surge of electrical feedback that crackled through the system. It was more than just mechanical failure, it was as though the creature's very mind was fighting against him, resisting the treatment. "You're a stubborn one," Elias muttered under his breath. "Just like your queen." Hours passed in the sterile silence of the medical chamber. Elias worked tirelessly, piecing together the broken neural network, repairing the biomechanical systems with a combination of advanced tech and human ingenuity. His fingers ached from the delicate work, and his eyes burned from lack of sleep. Yet, despite the exhaustion, he couldn't stop. The beast was more than just a creature, it was a symbol of something greater, a representation of power, and he couldn't allow it to fail. The Tharker would never forgive him, and neither would the beast, whose silent suffering seemed to echo through the room. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Elias stepped back, breathing heavily. The creature's massive chest rose and fell with a deeper, more steady rhythm. Its eyes fluttered open, glowing with that same bright amber light. For the first time in hours, Elias saw movement, a slight twitch of the beast's tail, the flexing of its powerful limbs. "It's not perfect," Elias whispered, but it was enough. The beast was alive, awake, and responding to the neural connection once more. Chapter 4. The Price of Failure. Elias took a step back as the beast began to stir, its massive form shifting on the medical table. The air in the room seemed to thrum with energy, and for a moment, Elias could feel a sense of accomplishment. The creature was alive, healed at least enough to be functional again. But the relief he felt was short-lived. "Is it ready?" Queen Zortha's voice cut through the silence, as cold and commanding as ever. Elias looked up, his eyes meeting the Queen's unblinking gaze. She had entered the chamber without a sound, her presence filling the room with an overwhelming sense of authority. The officers that had escorted her stood silently behind her, their eyes never leaving Elias. The Queen's gaze shifted to the beast, then back to Elias, her eyes narrowing. "It is healed," Elias said, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "But it will need time to fully recover. Its systems are delicate, and the mental strain will take time to heal." Zortha's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't one of satisfaction. "You think your work is done, human? The beast is ready for the next phase. Your role here is not finished." Elias blinked, confusion settling over him. "What do you mean?" "The beast is alive. It can move, it can function dash." "The beast is not a pet, human," the Queen interrupted, her voice laced with venom. "It is a tool, a weapon. and its power must be unleashed. You will accompany it into the heart of the Dominion. You will ensure that it is ready for battle. Elias's heart sank. Battle? I thought you wanted it healed, not turned into a war machine again. Queen Zortha's expression darkened. The beast is more than a war machine. It is a symbol of our power, and you will serve us, human, or face the consequences. The officer stepped forward, his voice harsh. The Queen's orders are clear. The beast will be tested. You will prepare it for combat, and you will accompany it. The Tharkar Empire does not tolerate failure. Elias stood frozen, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. His work was not over. In fact, it had only just begun. The Tharkar had no intention of letting the beast simply heal. It was to be used as a weapon, a force of nature that would bend the galaxy to their will. And Elias was to be the one to unleash that power. As the Queen turned and walked away, her officers following in silence, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he had been trapped in a game far beyond his control. He had saved the beast, yes, but what had he truly done? He had healed a creature, only for it to be turned into something far more dangerous. The doors to the medical chamber closed behind him, and Elias was left standing alone with the beast. He felt a chill run down his spine as the creature's amber eyes locked onto his. The beast had been saved, but at what cost? What was he truly a part of now? He had healed a weapon, and now it was time to see just how far that weapon would go.